Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys, as always, so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you guys are listening to us on. It's just been really cool, especially in the past few months, to see the growth and see how many people have shared this show around and how many different people across the world, it seems, are listening and tuning in. And of course, all the kind messages and all the emails that you guys have sent. It's really, really cool. And it's really awesome, especially as basketball season is truly getting underway here. To know how helpful this podcast has been to so many of you. So as always, before we start, thank you and welcome back. This topic is one that is so much fun for me because as many of you who are longtime listeners know, I've talked to coaches and trainers and people with a whole wide array of experience, those who've been coaching for a very long time, those who played at a very high level, some even at a professional level as well. And it's so cool to be also able to talk to some guests who maybe didn't necessarily have that background and who were still passionate about basketball, who jumped into the game, and as the title of this episode suggests, we're learning on the go and devoted themselves to being as good of a coach as they can be and are learning from all different people and just sharing their love of basketball, even if they didn't necessarily have the same background as, what you might think a traditional coach would have. And I think that this is really cool. And so for those of you listening, even if this situation doesn't necessarily apply to you, I think that there's people that around you or in the community who might be really passionate about basketball, who might be a little scared, who might be a little bit hesitant of kind of jumping into that coaching ranks. But I think that this episode might be able to help you, give you some tools to have that conversation or empower that person to say, hey, like, give this a shot and go jump into this thing. And I think that that's what this episode can definitely do for you. So very excited to get into this. Very excited to be joined by my guest. He is a brave individual, as we were talking about. He's a middle school teacher. Along with that, he's a shooting coach, a trainer, coach at Northgate as well. Very, very happy to be joined by Coach Osunde. Coach, thank you so much for joining us here. So happy to have you on. How are things going?
Everything's going well. I'm happy to be on. Big fan of the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I'm really excited, Coach. Now, normally we talk about with this first part about, the coaching journey and where the game's taken you. But as I said on the offset, right, your journey is a little bit different. So what was kind of your journey that led you to becoming a shooting coach and a trainer, led you to Northgate? Because I know that you didn't necessarily take the traditional path maybe into coaching.
Yeah. My journey is a journny of a lot of, I don't know. I've been a basketball fan my whole life. Kind of a sports junkie, just in general. Uh, I've loved basketball since I was like 4 years old, but I've just loved a lot of sports. Um, Played baseball growing up, played football growing up, and then in high school, I decided to wrestle because basketball at the time was too expensive for my family to play, for me to join. So I wrestled, and ended up being a wrestler for 4 years. I go to college, and then and all this time I'm still, watching basketball clips, doing like practice in the backyard, but like obviously not for like anything. I'm just doing it just for fun. Um, and at 18, I kind of just fell in love with the game at a deeper level. And I'm a diehard Kobe Bryant fan. I'm a Laker fan. I'm a Duke Blue Devil fan.
Oh, wow.
Big
Okay.
Coach K fan. I love Coach K. Um, and so I didn't start coaching. I just started like working on just development, on my own development, my personal development at 18, because I was doing a lot of rec leagues, intramural leagues for the college, and I just wanted to be very good. I was an athlete, I would say. Like I could jump really high, I could run really fast, but basketball challenged me in a different way where I couldn't. Like obviously for a weaker competition, I could just jump over a lot of kids and just lay the ball up.
Yeah.
But once people were able to find out I couldn't shoot, they they started just fouling me. Funny story about that. I had a season in my intramural leagues where once they found out I couldn't really shoot, they started fouling me, and I went like for that whole season, I went like 2 for like 20 or something from the free throw line.
Oh no.
Just not good. And it's funny because now I'm a shooting coach. So,
Yeah, that's right. You are.
um, but at 22, I started coaching at elementary school through this after school program where I was a tutor for the first half and then the sports coach for the second half. Um, I had to they made me coach every sport. And the worst sport I coached at was basketball. Like I had the least successful season in basketball, like 1 win and 1 or 2 wins in 2 seasons.
Really?
Yes. And then after that, I moved, I got a teaching job, my first teaching job at Kalinga Middle School, and I became the head middle school girls basketball coach in 2018. Uh, Pretty decent season, barely missed the playoffs by like 1 game. Um, the following year, I got connected with the high school coach for the girls team. My original plan was to stay the head middle school basketball coach, and I kind of wanted to make it a feeder, so I took the initiative to try to connect to the the high school basketball coach, so that we could, build the program. Um, that led to me becoming the JV and varsity assistant over at that school for the 2019 season.
Hmm.
Then I got a non-reelect from my middle school right before the pandemic started. So that led me in a bind. And I always say that I'm a big faith guy and a big believer in God and Jesus. And I always feel like God led me to Northgate because I literally applied for teaching jobs in all the areas of the Central Valley, the Fresno, Clovis, Lemoore,
Sure.
Kalinga area, yeah, all whole area. I applied to Southern California, and I told myself I was like, I do not want to move back to the Bay Area. I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I was like, I don't want to move over there. And my mom was just like, you should apply up there. I applied there and got like 3 calls instantly, like the next day.
That's funny.
And
That's crazy how that works out. Yeah.
exactly. So I was just like, oh, I guess. So I said, I guess I'll make the move. The principal I was working for originally told us that we were going to be working in class, but as we all know, that year became like a pure online
Yeah.
school. So I move out there. Um, I don't want to dive too deep because I know we're gonna talk about this later.
Hmm.
But I ended up getting connected with the head coach of Northgate, and he offered me the job as a freshman assistant at first, but a couple guys dropped out, so I became the freshman head coach. We ended up not having enough freshmen that year, so I was just the JV head and assistant coach at the same time. We
Right.
kind of just split duties, and then last year, and then I've been at Northgate since.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like so funny how many stories that I kind of hear about, like, and of people, right, who are like, I'm never going to this place, or I never want to be here. It's like, I'll just apply or I'll just put it out there. And then it's like, oh, and then I moved and then I went there and I haven't looked back since. Like, it's just so funny how like that always tends to happen, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to stay in the valley because as a teacher in the valley, like your pay is pretty good to the cost of living.
Hmm.
But then you move to the Bay Area and then you're just like, yeah, this is not good to the it's not equivalent to the cost of living. So it's a big difference, but I wouldn't look back on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Once you find your spot, you find your spot. No, I love the Bay Area. I've been to the Bay Area quite a few times. I'm a big San Francisco Giants fan for those who don't know. So I love the Bay, but I don't think the Bay loves me when it comes to being able to live there. So I know I I,
Well,
I get it. You got to make it work as best you can. That's funny. You mentioned about the fact that you are a shooting coach, even though maybe in your rec days you maybe never would have thought of yourself as ever necessarily becoming one, but you are one now. You are a shooting coach, you are a trainer. So I want to ask you first, like, how did you get into wanting to be a shooting coach when that was something that you were like really like struggling with and really like had a little bit of difficulties when it came to getting your shot down? How did that lend to you wanting to become a shooting coach?
So I I was so like I think going through that whole thing and just understanding that I was so easy to guard once people figured me out made me just want to just go into shooting so much. Um, and so I just started practicing just on myself, just like with myself, trying to be able to be a good shooter
Yeah.
and just being a decent shooter. And I just started practicing a lot. And I wouldn't say I've ever mastered it even today, but it wasn't until I met a coach I'll mention later on, Mike Dunn, who is a phenomenal shooting coach who taught me how to be even better shooting coach. But in my early days, I just really honed in on studying shooters, great shooters, Ray Allen, Clay Thompson, Steph Curry, even Kobe, and all these people who just shot really well from the three and from the mid range. And I would just try to see differences and just kind of just study mechanics, basically.
Yeah, I mean, those are some pretty good role models to follow, right? Those are some pretty good people
Yeah.
if you're gonna try and figure out how to get shooting down. So then, like that leads you then, so you have, you know, that this passion into it, and so then you're kind of like building up, right, from there. Are you kind of like building up like how you would instruct somebody how to do that? Are you kind of like building up like the whole like the template, you know, or you said you worked with like others, right, to kind of like build a plan on like how to coach shooting properly?
Yeah, so I've worked with this shooting coach called Mike Dunn. His at name on Instagram is C Mike Dunn, and he's a great, phenomenal shooting coach. Like I joined his program and he said, I want you to, and he was just basically, I told him I just wanted to learn how to teach shooting. And he's like, okay, I'll teach you, but you have to like try to apply it to yourself first. And, you know, you apply it and it's just, you see a lot of, and it's just like, you don't understand how to develop a shooter until you actually are in the mindset of a shooter. And so it was like a good 6 to 8 week program and where I was just struggling like crazy. And he always says like if you're struggling, you should keep doing that workout until you figure it out. And so it's funny with shooting, it's all up to the shooter whether they're going to be good or not. Um, which he always told me is like we're just like the doctors. We prescribe you the medicine, but it's whether you take the medicine you're going to be a good shooter. If you don't do if you don't do the things you're supposed to do, if you don't work hard at it, you're not going to be a good shooter. I used to blame myself for not developing shooters who are good enough, but then he just made me realize it's like you already gave them the blueprint. If they don't follow the blueprint, you can't do anything about that. And
Right, kind of like
so,
the lead the horse to water sort of thing.
yes, you lead the horse to water, but can't make it drink. And one thing we have to, as coaches and even as trainers, we have to just remember that you can, unless you're going to work the kid out 7 days a week or 6 days a week or 5 days out of the week, that same kid, you can't be responsible for their development. Um, they're responsible for their own development, but you can give them the skills to be able to be good at those things that they're going to be doing. And so he just taught me how to just make things click and just how to make things progress. And that kids just need to understand like you're gonna have days where you just struggle mightily, and then one day just like a snap of the finger, just you just get it. And that's how it was for me. Like I was shooting, and he was helping me switch up forms and all this stuff that was more comfortable for me. And I would have days where I would just miss, and then I just remember this one workout I did where he just gave me the good blueprint, and I just was not missing anything, and I was just like, what is going on? Like this is crazy."
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think that that's one of the things that has always been something that it's tough sometimes as a coach. I think when it comes to like teaching shooting to have to remember is that, you know, if you're going to go and work on a player's shot or work on a player's form. Like you can have this 1 hour, an hour and a half workout with them that you do all this stuff, but at the end of the day, the it's only really going to stick with that player if they're working on it extensively on their own, because that's when the muscle memory and that's when it really clicks. Like you're not really going to completely overhaul somebody's shot permanently in like an hour
Hmm.
workout that you see them, a couple times during the week.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me get a couple little insights from you, Coach, here before we get into our topic about besides practice. If you're thinking about looking at working on a player's shot or trying to fix a player's shot, what are some things that you like to look at to try and potentially fix?
So I look at 5 parts of a shot. I look at the hand placement, the sequence of their movement, the balance, their guide hand, and I look at how they're missing. Uh, Hand placement is always just how are they how are they holding the ball? Some kids like to hold the ball from both sides, and then they try to like then as they move up, they move their shooting hand underneath. And what you want to do in a shot, you want to make it as simple as possible for them. Obviously, if a kid's making shots consistently, I don't change anything of their form. I just like if you're just going through a funk. I have a lot of kids who are good shooters who will just be like, "Coach, can you help me with my form?" And I'm just like, "What's wrong?" I'm just missing right now. I don't know why. And it's like you're just in a funk. You just got to get yourself out the funk. Like you got to just do things, do layered drills that just get you out of a funk instead of trying to do a whole overhaul. There's some kids who don't have good shooting, and that's when you actually apply all these things. And you want to take away all the variability from their shot and make it as simple as possible for them.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of a good distinction you kind of have to make as a coach, right? Like, is this player just kind of in a bit of a slump right now? Is there just minor little things maybe that mentally they need to do, or is it like, whoa, like this whole shot's completely broken, and then there has to be fixing? And I think that there's sometimes a temptation maybe to try and fix a lot of things rather than just kind of let the player kind of like work through it mentally. And I know that that's sometimes tough for me when it's just like I want to try and give them all these like little tips and little things to tweak, but it's like, no, I just got to kind of let them be and kind of let them work through it, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So you talked about we're going to talk about now that this idea about when you jump into this coaching profession, right? You're learning on the fly. You're learning on the go. Not only are you learning on the fly here, but also a lot of coaching experience and things you've been working on the last few years has been through a global pandemic as well, which I know is also crazy. So when you get that first coaching job, when you're given that reign as being a coach, as well as, I think you mentioned how you were a coach at a lower level, but also an assistant coach as well. Like, where did you start? Like, where did you begin to try and like figure out how to do this coaching thing? Like where did it all like where did you start from?
So, for all the people who are like trying to like figure out how to like learn on the fly, the internet is such a great tool. But you have to also just know how to use it because, my first couple years, like I said, I wasn't successful. 2 wins and like 2 or 3 wins in 2 seasons, not very good. So, um, and it's because I used to just try to find plays and just do easy kind of zone sets just because that's all I really knew. I knew man-to-man defense, but I didn't know how to teach proper man-to-man fundamentals. And I taught zone. But the funny thing about zone is if you don't know good fundamental man-to-man defense, your zones don't work that well.
Exactly.
So, I was teaching kids, they were just getting dominated defensively, and then on the offensive end, I was trying to run set plays, but set plays don't work if you don't know what type of defense the other team is running. And so I would have a hard time at those points recognizing if a team was running man or zone or whether the plays I was picking up were zone or man plays. So I had to go through a whole just like very detailed study on stuff. And I would think the coaching clinics, I would just do a lot of online coaching clinics. Um, I did a coaching mentorship program with this Euro League coach in I think he's in either Germany or Switzerland or somewhere in that area. Um, his name was Thomas. I don't know how to say his last name. It was something hard, But he really helped me with my development as a coach. I did his mentorship program, and he walked me through how to format a practice, how to run a practice, and all this stuff. I ran into a lot of good coaches. I ran into a coach in when I was substituting for the Fresno area, and he would teach. He told me he's the one who first told me it's not. I don't teach like he coached girls basketball, and he told me I don't teach girls plays. I just teach them how to play first because if they know how to play, then they can actually run the play right. Because if the play breaks down and you have a whole bunch of people, girls or boys who don't know how to play the game, once the play breaks down, they're just lost and it's scramble. But
Yeah.
if you teach them how to play, once the play breaks down, they can actually make a play themselves instead.
Yeah, it's
So
and I think it's like a whole like fundamental like shift of like thinking about like okay, you could try and find like you mentioned, right, all these plays and all these sets and things that you could find online, but it's like wait a minute, like these girls actually have to like know how to play the game and like what they're actually trying to do on the court. You got to start from there first before you can even build anything up from there.
exactly. Um, but that became a problem for me as well because to be able to know how to play the game, you have to know how to play the game. And I've never played the game.
Yeah.
So that put me on another journey of learning how to play the game. So I did a lot of just pickup. I played a lot of pickup basketball with people who are more experienced and better than me. And I just would always just look up, YouTube's a great resource, a lot of online coaching clinics on how to play the game, how to teach kids to play the game. And it really helped me understand. And I think I took a lot from my wrestling background. In wrestling, we do a lot of uh, drilling and a lot of things where we do situational wrestling. So you start off from a certain position. And it's very similar to short-sided games, which becomes a staple in my coaching. Short-sided games are just a great way of development because I felt like situational wrestling was the thing that made me such a better wrestler because I was one of the top like 25 wrestlers in my state at one point,
Mm-hmm.
um, in my weight class at least. And so I just thought all my development was just, oh, the situational wrestling really helped. And then just, live wrestling. So in the basketball sense, that would be more like short-sided games and then going into a live 5-on-5 repping those same skills that you just worked on. So if a girl or a boy is not a good dribbler, you would do a lot of dribbling, and then you do dribbling with a guided defender who is going like 50, 60% and forcing this person to have tight control. And then I would put them in a situation where they have to have that tight control. And then I put them into a game like setting where it's just like now apply it. And that's my philosophy on development.
So it's a lot of competition. I gotta just kind of like learn trial by fire sort of thing. Play small sided
Yes,
games. Learn to compete. So
because
you're
you only
you
learn from
talked
failure.
about so what were some lessons that you kind of learned? Playing pickup, playing against people that you were better. How did you kind of like learn or see the game differently through those experiences?
You gotta learn how to you gotta learn you're gonna let people down when you're playing a pickup because people always want to win. And when you're out there trying to just get better, you're just gonna make mistakes. Like I was over here shooting shots that I probably shouldn't have been shooting. Not trying to just working on only my own self, but like just trying to work inside of a team dynamic as well.
Yeah.
Um, you would shoot. A lot of people do drive and kick, and you're just. And as I was learning by playing myself, I'm also learning by watching other people play as well. And so like they're over here driving to the basket. I noticed how defenders would shift in, they kick out. I'm not like I said, I wasn't a shooter at the time. So I was like, I'm just taking these jump shots and they go in, they don't go in. But you would have those good teammates who'd be like, keep shooting, and then you'd have the teammates that would make you just not want to shoot anymore because they'd just be like, just stop shooting, just you get the ball, just drive it. And it's like you learn on the go. It's just kind of like the topic today, just learning on the go.
Yeah, I think that competition though, it's such a good thing. I think that I know that there was a clip that was going around recently on social media about, players being drilled out, and like, they do so many drills or learn so many drills, but they don't do enough time or spend enough time actually competing, that I think
Yeah.
that like you just learn so much from like competing and things that have like a practical use to them, rather than things that might like look fancy or look nice, but like actually like competing forces you to like really focus on like what action do I need to actually be doing to put, our team in the most successful position to like succeed. You learn a lot of team basketball that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So you also talked about how you did a lot of learning from other coaches. I know you've mentioned other coaches you've learned from before. So like what did you kind of take from different coaches as you started your coaching career? And then like what were some pieces that you kind of created or made like on your own?
I would say the two coaches that like are my main influences for my coaching journey was Coach Mike Walker of Kalinga High School actually. Kalinga High School. He's the head girls coach. And then the current coach I'm under is Coach Mike Shaughnessy of Northgate High School, and he's a point forward trainer. That's his little training program. And
Mm-hmm.
those two have really made me into the coach I am today because I've just learned so much from them. Coach Mike Walker, he kind of gave me the foundation of being what I call a transformational coach because he's just passionate about his players and not just their development as athletes, but like their spiritual development, their mental development. And he isn't afraid to tie his faith into his coaching, which kind of gave me the confidence to be that kind of coach of letting my authentic self just come out in my coaching. And then Mike Shaughnessy is like my X's and O's and culture guy because he kind of just is like he pushes me to be a better coach. When early in my player development days, where I was doing free training sessions or free workouts, like I was offering my time to him to like be like a assistant for him for free, and
Yeah.
he would just be like, "Oh, you can run the warm up," and I'm just like, "What?" On the fly, and he works with elite athletes, and I'm just like, what am I gonna how am I gonna help this elite high school basketball kid out if I've never been an elite basketball player? But you'll understand that kids kind of just will they just want you to help them out, and as long as you're doing something that's gonna help, that's all they care about. Um, he's he's taught me a lot about culture, how to inspire athletes every day. He's improved my defensive teaching skills and he's allowed me to understand that offense is all about spacing and actions. Those are just as important as sets.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. So you have like kind of like your person who you kind of have like the culture aspect and the one who kind of like helps you be like your authentic self, and then like the X's and O's person too as well, which is kind of cool.
exactly. I kind of take a lot from both of them. They just both gave me some valuable insight and they kind of help create my playbook. But I'm also in a master's program right now for coaching and uh, athletic administration.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been helpful for me to create my own playbook and create my own offense and defensive. And just it kind of asks you questions of what kind of team do you want to run? How do you want to run? Do you want to run fast, play fast, um, and all that stuff? So coming up with my own offensive and defensive philosophies has just been amazing for me.
That's so what are so now to pick your brain a little bit, what sort of philosophies are you kind of mulling over, thinking about implementing here in the future? What sort of things have you kind of specifically picked up from that?
So I'm a person who I kind of just want to run fast. Like I want to play fast and I want to play that kind of aggressive style defense and offense. But I also want to kind of like the Phoenix. I would say I want to model my coaching after like Monty Williams, the Phoenix Suns last year. I know they had the big collapse at the end, but like you have a point guard like Chris Paul, who's like a slow tempo kind of guy, but they have a whole bunch of young guys on that team, so they like to run fast. So doing like a mixture of both, where we can run in transition, but at the same time, at the end of games where we need to, we can slow it down and run something to perfection. Defensively, I'm a big time believer that defense literally wins championships, or defense at least makes you good enough to win a championship. I would say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works for any sport if you really think about it. I'm a big time Raider fan, so my Raiders never believe in defense,
Oh
and
no.
it makes me upset.
Yeah.
But from a basketball standpoint, like if you look at the Celtics last year, they were a team that wasn't supposed to be anywhere close to the NBA Finals, but literally just having obviously luck, but a lot of good defensive emphasis from their coaching and having a top five defense and any for anybody will make you at least adequate. Like I believe like if you have a team full of kids who aren't good enough, if they at least can have if they at least have a solid defensive foundation, you can etch out a lot of wins that you probably shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah, and I mean defense too, it's as you start teaching it and refining it and implementing it, right? I think a lot of the players start to, hopefully really realize that a lot of defense isn't a lot of necessarily basketball skills you need to have.
Yeah.
It's effort. I think
Hmm.
so many coaches will tell you it's effort, and then just kind of some mental knowing, like spacing, knowing where you're trying to get to, knowing what you're trying to accomplish, and then you you find yourself in a lot of success. I think it's so funny to be in situations that I see sometimes where um some players offensively have like this whole like skill set, this whole arsenal that they've developed, but yet the first time a defense does something simple enough like forcing them to their offhand, like everything just falls apart. And I'm like, well, I guess, sometimes defense does it can have some real simple solutions on defense if you can exploit things that maybe the other team hasn't really worked on. And so, like you said, right, you can get a lot out of just a solid defense that at the very least will keep you in most games.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's cool. I mean, it's kind of cool to have like, and it sounds like you have just based on your situation that you're in right now, not only are you like building your coaching portfolio and kind of learning as you're kind of going through these different programs, but you're still working directly under coaches, so you have like that direct line of communication to like pick their brains on as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm learning from Coach Mike Shaughnessy right now is last year we ran a 4-out 1-in because we had pretty good size down low. Not like huge kids, but pretty decent size. We were top 50 in the state of California last year. Had our first open division win, or even just making it to open division in the first time in school history was such an accomplishment. This year's such a different year. We changed our whole playbook because we don't have the size down low. We're kind of like average size across. And so we're now in a 5-out, and it's just like being in that kind of circumstances where now you're in a whole different overhaul of your offensive system. It made me realize it's like, okay, as a coach, I need to be super flexible, especially as a high school coach, because I'm not a college coach who gets to recruit who he wants. I gotta coach the kids I get. Kind of like as a teacher. I think my biggest teaching mentor, Steven Martinez, gave me like a insight that I only can teach the kids that come into my classroom, and you
Yeah.
can't do anything about that. And so, from a coaching standpoint, that just means you have to, just like in teaching, you have to change the way you teach, you have to change the way you coach, based off the personnel that's inside your classroom or inside on your roster.
Yeah, it's and that it could be tricky sometimes because sometimes I know, and I've been that way too, like kind of stubborn on certain offensive and defensive philosophies I always want to do, but like you have to adjust to who your personnel is. If you have like a big guy or you have somebody like that who you can really run the offense for, like you're going to have to design a system around it. I haven't really had a situation where I've had like a strong like post girl or come through yet, but like it'll come one day, and then when it does, like I better be ready to have something in place system wise to make sure that like I'm using her as best as I can, even if that means not doing the same offense or the same offense philosophies I was using the previous years.
Yeah, very important.
So, like, I think that one of the more fascinating things as you're kind of like talking about your journey is like you had to have been in a situation where you just were taking in so much information at once, and you have to sort of sift through like what's useful to me, what isn't useful to me, like is this important, is this not important, like what does this mean, like it's a very vague general question, but like how did you kind of like deal with like all of this input that you were getting of all of this stuff and all of this knowledge and all of this information? Like how did you figure out like what mattered to you and what you needed to take with you, and how did you like separate that from the stuff that like was irrelevant?
Very good question. Um, it's actually very like coming from a person like who just didn't know the game. It's very hard to like kind of decipher what's important because you know you can't trust every ad you see online. You can't trust every trainer, every basketball coach online who's gonna just say, "Oh, this is the key to creating great players," or "This is a perfect system to," because everyone's trying to sell something at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So
Nothing's
I think
free.
it's like kind of like that thing in the Bible that they call discernment. Just being able to decipher, like discern what is going to fit your style of coaching. Like obviously, that's why it's important to as a coach to kind of come up with your offense and defensive philosophies first, and even just as a vague defensive and offensive philosophy, and just imagine how do you want to see your team play? How do you want to see kids? How do you want to see your kids act? Your culture is just as important for anything. And I know you just had the Clovis High School coach last week, and I listened to that one, and I was just like, yeah, like your culture is just as important. And understanding all those things as a basketball coach, once you understand those things, then it kind of makes deciphering what is valuable to you and what's not. It makes it way more easier to like
Mm-hmm.
understand because there's a lot of people who just put like a lot of junk out there where it's just like you're looking at it and you're like, oh, that looks cool, but then you like are like, I don't think that's actually developing anything, or
Yeah.
that's actually going to help, or it's going to actually going to work, or it only works because they have these type of players. It only works because they have this. They have a 7 footer, or it works because you have an elite athletic guard at this. But I think for me personally, I take everything and I kind of just always have like a little folder for everything. And when the time comes, I kind of just it kind of like a light bulb clicks, and I'm like, oh, I kind of touched over this topic before, and I go and I look into my little repertoire of things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can use this, I can use this, I can use that.
It's one of the harder connections I know I had to make when I started coaching, was to connect the things that I saw or the coaching clinics that I would go to or listen to, the things I would see online, the things I would see on video, and then connect that with the reality of like the players who I had, especially because I started coaching at, a middle school level. And so to me, like seeing this stuff about like UConn, like women's sets or Stanford women or all this other stuff. And I'm like, how do I connect this to like who it is that I'm coaching? And then, like you mentioned, it's like, maybe I got to look at it the opposite way and look at like, who am I working with, and like what is it that they need? And then like how do I find things that are going to directly like fit what it is they need? Because I know, at least when I first started coaching in the groups that I was working with, they did not need all of the stuff that was like out there in all of these coaching clinics. Not that any of it was bad or anything, but like they were not ready for it, and it was not going to be
Mm-hmm.
good coaching for them if I started trying to implement all of this sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And I think one of the cool things about that, and I'll let you speak to that too, is like if you are kind of like learning on the go and you're kind of like trying to decipher all the stuff that's good or not, like you don't have to necessarily worry about all of the maybe the more like complicated and maybe all of like the really intricate like things that are going on. Like if your players just need like maybe a certain like list of things that they need to work on, I feel like that makes it much more manageable when you're like, okay, we just have like these specific things we're going to work on and get better at and improve. To me, like a list like that or being able to see it that way would make it like a lot more manageable, and something I would personally feel a lot more confident being able to handle like coaching and dealing with.
Yeah, I feel lists are if especially if you can see the list, just like you said, it makes it so much easier to just like know how to improve. And the same thing for players. If you get them at like we do at the end at the end of the year and the beginning of the season, we do player evaluations. And it's just like I always come up with three things that I'm like, you should improve in. And it helps the kid because then they're like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on these three things the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
And if I focus on these three things, the next year I should be better at these things. And then you also give them their strengths because you don't want them to forsake their strengths just to focus on their weaknesses. And now their strengths from last year become uh, a weak point for them, which I've actually seen happen to one kid on our team currently who he used to have he used to be money from mid range. He used to be a great driver and attacker, and then he as a sophomore, and then his junior year he became a spot up shooter, and he became very good at shooting to the point where you could tell he worked on his shot because he didn't have that shot before from three. Where he was now not driving to the basket and he was not getting to his spots like he was before, and he kind of like lost that ability to do that in his game because he just focused primarily on making sure he could be a knockdown shooter.
Yeah.
And so it's just important for coaches to remember to remind kids work on your strengths just as and you work on your weaknesses two times more because you don't want your strengths to dwindle while you're working on something else.
Yeah, it's like I need you to really focus on this, but also like don't forget all this too, because if you lose that, then that's just as bad. If you lost like
Exactly.
that skill set, like oh yeah, you definitely don't want that. You definitely don't want that happening. Let me ask you, just because I'm just kind of fascinated about like the story about this. Like, what was it like for you when you were coaching those first few games, when you were like really out there, like making like the in-game adjustments and coaching while the game was going on? Like what was that like for you? Did you find it was like really overwhelming at first? Were you able to manage it? Like what was it like when you really started jumping in and were coaching those games for the first few times?
Frustrating. Coaching, especially coaching in the Bay Area, for boys basketball for like a good program. It's like hoop culture out here is just amazing. It's very all the kids love to hoop, and so when you're out here and you have to make those in-game adjustments against some very smart coaches, you're just you get overwhelmed. Like I would feel frustrated because sometimes I wouldn't be able to identify certain things that were being abused. But like sometimes my varsity coach would be there to just watch, and he would help me out. He would just be like, "You need to run this. You need to run that." Oh, they're running like a team would switch randomly to a 1-3-1, and it's like I've only worked on 2-3 zones, man-to-man defense. I've never worked against like a 1-3-1. Like I think that was my first time running through a 1-3-1 like 2 years ago. And so we were just struggling. And, he comes with the clipboard, he shows me a play, and I I say, okay, I give it to the kids, and we start running these things to perfection. And I think it just as a coach, I just have to remember that I can't have pride where in my field because the moment I have pride, I'm gonna there then comes disgrace. There's a proverb in the Bible that says when pride comes, the proverb then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And I
Hmm.
just need to be humble at all times to be able to accept coaching from others and um accept all that from others so that I can be able to build my foundation and become a better coach every day.
It was always amazing to me, and I'm sure you must have felt the same way. I remember when I first started coaching, just like how quickly everything goes, just how quick the
Yes.
game goes by, right? Like,
You
oh
think a
man.
game's they say a game's like 40 minutes and you're just like 40 minutes is done like that? Like game just started, it's already the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and like you're trying to I remember oh man, those first times coaching and like trying to make a correction about something that I saw on the court because we just got beat on the defensive end, but now I need to call something out offensively, and now they're running this different set, or like you said, they got the 1-3-1 going, and I'm just like, I remember thinking like, how does anyone communicate all this stuff at once? Oh man, just
Oh
so
my
much,
goodness.
just crazy, like how quick the game goes and how much like you just got to be able to learn things on the fly. Like that's funny. Um, did you find that the speed of the game, you moved on then as you were going to the high school level and doing like the freshman, the JV level, like did you start to kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm? Did you start to kind of like when did the game, if at all, like start to slow down at all for you?
The more you just the more you're around it, the the slower it starts to look. And it's just it's as a coach like now, like there's just so much going on where now everything just looks like I kind of feel like now I just know what the right move is at a lot more moments now than I did before. Before I used to just it was just going way too fast, and sometimes I would just be lost. Um,
Yeah.
but like now it's just like you look at the game and when you've seen it for a while, because I coached our JV squad this summer, and this was my first time. This was my second year coaching JV technically, and just watching the speed at the varsity level first, you just see like, okay, this is how fast people are making decisions. This is how fast the game is moving. Then you look at the JV and you're like, oh, this is okay. This is a lot slower, a little slower. Then you look at the freshman and you're, oh, it's a lot slower. And you're like, so you're watching the speed of the game and you're just like, okay, now I know what this person, and in my mind I'm always just I watch the film or I watch film back and I'm just like, okay, they could have did this, they could have did that, and I take these notes so I know like this is how I should teach this action a little bit better. And just going back and just being receptive of what you're doing, it just takes a lot of self assessment to be able to catch up to the speed of the game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that you the more it's like you said, right about like the way to kind of get better as a player is you got to play, and it's probably the same way of coaching, right? That's how you get better.
Yeah.
You got to coach, and you got to get in there, and you got to just get used to the speed of everything. And so was that it's just all these little questions now coming to my mind. Like, what was the process like for you when you first started looking at film? Did you know kind of what you were looking for? Did you have somebody who was able to kind of walk you through it? Like, what was that process of evaluating or looking at game film like?
Yeah, so I worked with my EuroLeague coach again one time on just breaking down film, and the important thing of breaking down film is overwhelming to first start off. Like film is so overwhelming because you're gonna focus on every little mistake that your team makes. And if you do that, you're not gonna get anything done. You're not gonna be productive because it's impossible to correct all those mistakes, especially when the uh the season starts. When season starts and you're getting to the time after January where it's just like games every other day, you get into your league season and you're just like, there's no way you can correct that many mistakes in a 2 day practice frame.
Right.
So it's always important to just identify what's the biggest things that we messed up, where are the biggest aspects we messed up, and what are our biggest positives. Because I don't ever because I just like I found in coaching, like if you just focus on the negatives, you're not gonna really then you can't see growth. Like, if you have a growth mindset with your coaching, that means you have to focus on positives just as much as you focus on the negatives. With the negatives, we just look at them and we say, okay, these are our areas where we can grow. And then with our positives, we say this is what we're really good at, and we need to continue to do this at a high level. Um, because if you go into the film room and you're watching film and you're just like, okay, we messed up on this pass, we messed up on our passing this game, oh, we messed up with the rebounding, we messed up with this and that and this and that, you're gonna just overwhelm your kids, you're gonna overwhelm yourself, and you're just gonna think, oh, we gotta fix this and fix that, and then the next game's gonna come and they're just gonna mess up on everything because you didn't give them a specific focus to work on.
Well, and it's probably gonna, and I'm sure you can kind of speak to that. It's not a good headspace, I don't think, for your program to either be in too. If your program always feels, or your players always get the message that they're always doing things wrong, and then they're never, they've never improved on anything or never gotten better at anything. I don't think that that's good for team morale or team chemistry.
No, it's not at all.
Um, So what has kind of been your role? I know you talked about being you're in that assistant head coaching role. So in those varsity games, you kind of are looking at the game from a different perspective. So what has kind of like been like your responsibility in that role? Like, are you doing stats? Are you talking to the guys in the bench? Like, what have you kind of learned from having that kind of more unique sort of coaching role, being like on the assistant and the varsity side?
Um, so I'm a go-getter. So I try to make it to every practice. I try to even after I stop coaching, like after JV practice or freshman practice is over, I'm trying to attend the varsity practice first or after or whatever. I'm trying to get as familiar with them as possible so that when I'm in the game I can be effective. Like we all get a little scout report of our team if it's a team that we're used to, like a league team,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to make sure everyone understands the scout. I try to make sure they're adhering to the things, the principles of our program. Um, on the bench, I give my input whenever I think I see something, I see an exploit that we can take advantage of. And I have a great head coach who actually he'll listen when it comes down to it, and he'll still take the blame for it even if it goes horribly wrong and it's my mistake. He'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's on me," and and it's great to work with somebody like that because you can't grow unless you are pushed in positions where you have to grow.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that it's probably beneficial for you to, when you show up to these practices, for the players to like see you and know you, so that like when you are talking to them, at least they know who in the world it is talking to them and who's trying to like give them advice on something.
Yes, it's very valuable. Because the kids only value the coaches that spend time with them and actually seem to care.
Yeah.
They don't really love coaches who just want to show up whenever they want to show up or who kind of make coaching all about them.
Yeah, the idea about like they kids won't like care to learn until they learn you care. I think
Yes,
that's that old adage. I mean, it's true, right? Like that, it's 100% true. They gotta they're gonna test you to make sure that you actually are there for the right reasons before they're just gonna listen to you try and like coach them up or try to tell them anything like that. So, what do you think is next for your coaching journey? Like, what as you kind of feel? I know that you're still um you know like all coaches, right? Plenty to grow, plenty to work on, plenty to learn. So what do you feel like is next? Like what do you still really want to be working on to get to where you want to be, or what's kind of that next step for you?
so I'm working on just continuing to grow as a head coach. I want to run my own program one day, from the varsity level down. Listening to some of your old podcasts from the past on developing like a youth league, a youth development system, so that
Mm-hmm.
I can have a feeders program that goes into my high school program. Um, and working on just team bonding, things like that. All those things inspire me, and so being a high school head coach is just very inspiring. I'm also a big man of faith, so I kind of want to use my talents as a shooting coach, and I want to just get better and better at teaching shooting, and I want to tie that into ministry and become like some kind of basketball missionary or a basketball minister, where I can teach shooting and teach the love of God at the same time.
That's super cool and super ambitious to do, and I feel like it would be like a real awesome situation for you to be in, right? Because you're kind of mending in or blending in like two of your big passions, right? And I mean,
Yeah,
to me, that sounds like that's what it's kind of all about, to like take a few things that you're passionate about and then fuse those together and like kind of create this thing that's like even greater and like a super
exactly,
passion sort of thing. No,
exactly.
that's funny. That's awesome. Um, Let me ask you before we hit our concluding segment, what advice would you give to maybe somebody listening who's in your situation, who was in your situation, who's like, man, really want to go into coaching, but I didn't really play. I didn't really, have a lot of experience playing, but man, I really would like to get into coaching. What sort of advice would you give to somebody who would be in a similar situation that you were in?
Um, so my biggest thing would always be just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Obviously, going to coaching clinics online, going to coaching clinics in person is great, but being right there in front of the action is always an irreplicable feeling. Like you can't replace it. So and I think I always have to. I love to shout out people because I don't want anyone to feel like I'm not giving them credit for my journey. So, Coach Anthony Gonzalez of Los Positos Community College, he is my biggest. He's one of the biggest factors in me becoming the coach I am today because I reached out to him when I moved up to the Bay Area, and during the pandemic, I was asking him, "Oh, can I go and step and watch one of your workouts?" And he's just like, "Yeah." So I show up, and he just would let me just sit there and watch and teach a couple times and just see how it is to work on player development. And he's the one who got me connected with Coach Mike Shaughnessy in the first place. So, but like it would have never happened if I never DM'd him because if you don't put yourself out there, you can't be afraid to get shot down or you can't be afraid to be willing to learn. I had a lot of trainers that kind of just didn't really reply back or was just like, oh, you can just go here to learn how to do it. And I was just like, and I was very clear. I was like, I'm not looking to get paid to watch. You're helping me out and I will get paid soon. Maybe, I don't know. Not really in it for the money, but you're gonna get to that level soon, but you have to start somewhere. So just going out there and just asking just to be a volunteer, even as a coach, going to a high school that and just being like, oh, can I just help you out somehow for free, give you free service? Because if you're really passionate about it, you'll do it for free. Because at the end of the day, one day someone will pay you for the skills that you have.
I think that, and I've said this before, and I know for some people who've been listening to for me for a while, they'll be like, yes, I've heard you say this before, but it's true. I think that the coaching community and the basketball coaching community is so accepting, and I think that they're so eager to let other people in, and they would be so willing to help you out or give you some time if you want to volunteer or just sit down and talk to you. Like in my experience, like yeah, you might have some who might ignore you or might not get to you, but like you're gonna get somebody who's gonna respond to you and is gonna welcome you in. And like once you're in, like you're in sort of thing. And then you just go from there. So I know I like that a lot. Like you just got to put yourself out there because it's not as scary, I think, as some people might think. Like there's so many great people out there who are willing to like teach and share the game with you, like you mentioned.
Exactly. And you just gotta take advantage of those people. Like not like in a mean way.
Yeah. The
Obviously,
situation, yeah.
take advantage of the
The
situation.
opportunity that it
Yeah.
presents. Yes, of course. That's funny. Um, awesome. Coach, to wrap up, as you know, there's a couple of questions that I ask every guest, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here with this first one. So, thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from that career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I actually have two moments,
Sure.
one good and one negative. My good one was I had I always kind of struggled with just my confidence in being able to develop players. Um, and I think it takes you working with the right player to really help you understand that you're actually good at what you're doing. And I had a kid who was on my freshman team last year who I would say was horrendous from at shooting. This kid literally shot. I think he went 1 for 15 or 1 for 10 for the season on 3-point shooting,
Mm-hmm.
and 6 of them were air balls. But
Oh no.
this kid's a great facilitator, can dribble the ball like crazy, can finish pretty well, and plays decent defense. And is actually on our varsity roster this year. And I remember leaving the season, our coach told me like the only thing keeping that kid from being on the varsity roster this year is literally shooting. And so this off season, I helped work on his shot, and our big highlight moment was he went 1 weekend in the summer league. He went he hit 5 3-point shots in 1 weekend.
Oh wow.
Actually, and well, actually in like 2 games he hit five, and it was just like he was just like, I can't believe it. And I was just like, well, you worked at it. So I was working with this kid maybe like once or twice a week. But it's like I said earlier, he was the one he took my advice when I said, you gotta do these workouts literally every day. Not just the days I work with you, but every day. And it's shown, it's proved a lot. literally probably one of the top kids on our varsity roster right this year.
That is awesome.
And
That
then
is cool. Keep going.
my other moment is a not so good moment. I had a player my first couple years in my first year teaching at the middle school, um, who she was on my team, and she was going through a lot of family issues. I guess mom said something to her earlier that day, so she comes into the game and is just literally just lost on the court,
Mm,
and I take it and I berate her even more, and fought, and then I never thought anything of it. I kind of moved on from it, but and she never really gave me like she would come to my classroom still. She would talk to me. Never gave me the indication that she didn't like me until I found out like later that she just despised me and all this stuff. And I apologized 5 years later, and she was telling me how it still hurt. And I think the moment of that was just understanding as coaches that we have such power in our words and just power with our presence, just in general, in these kids' lives. And we never know what's going on in their outside lives unless we ask. And
yeah.
you can never relate struggle in the game. You can never think struggle in the game is just a lack of focus and a lack of energy. You always need to ask the question: is everything going on? Everything good? Like, are you okay? And if a kid obviously looks distraught, which is something that I missed back then, and I continue to regret it today, but at the same time, I'm able to understand and learn from my mistakes. But if a kid is in distress, there's more to this game than just playing the game. It's
Hmm.
literally making an impact on a young person's life and making them a better person for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no. I have those moments too where I just wish I can go back and take back something I said. And like you said, right, you never can, but the best we can do is learn from it to make sure it doesn't happen again. So yeah, no, I agree with you there. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, your platform to get out kind of your final message, closing thought, final idea that you want to leave the listeners with. So you kind of know the drill on how this works. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you that platform, and I'm just going to go ahead and let you take it from here.
All right, thank you. I think the biggest thing I've learned from my coaching program right now is um, us coaches need to be more transformational than transactional. So transactional coaching is where you're trading wins and losses or the ability to further your career for your help. Your help is only for them to benefit you in some way. But transformational coaching is more about building relationships and understanding the individual and building your players from the inside out. So we're focusing more on character building just as much as you focus on player development as an athlete. And I believe it's important, especially for our male athletes in today's society, just making our athletes more compassionate towards each other. Yes, it's good to be competitive, but not to the point where you are destroying your character for the sake of a win.
Hmm.
And we've been in there's been a lot of toxicity in the culture of coaching sometimes. I know there's a book called Inside Out Coaching by Joe Ironman where he talks about he had a coach that told him to, break a kid's nose just just to as he was grabbing a rebound just because he wanted to get that kid out of there or something like that. And it's just like that kind of coaching is actually very common where coaches will kind of go above and beyond the rules just to just to ensure victory, and it's appalling, but it's how the culture used to be. And I think the way we need to build the culture now is just to emphasize good character, good citizens. We're training the future husbands and future leaders and future wives and future uh, policymakers of America and even just worldwide. And so a good coach can have a lasting and profound impact on a young person's life, and we should take that in consideration in everything we do.
Yeah, that's really well said. I know that it's so easy to think about the basketball side of things, but yeah, keep in mind like who we actually are working with, like you said, are those future leaders and future, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, and decision makers of the future. And we got a lot of potential to do some really good if we know what we're doing with that, and to keep that in mind. No, that's
Exactly.
well spoken. Coach O, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your journey, learning on the go. I know you've learned so much already, and there's so much more that there is still for you to learn, but really excited to kind of follow along with your journey and see where that takes you. And especially as you continue to grow and continue to seek out those new learning opportunities and new challenges, I'm really excited to kind of follow that along. So best of luck with you. Best of luck with the program this year. And thank you so much for spending that time talking to us, Coach. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. This platform that you have is literally one of the things that helps improve my coaching as well, and improves any coach who isn't well versed in their craft, because it's just so much knowledge from other coaches just being poured out.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I hope that all of you listening feel the same way as well. Really, really appreciate the kind words. And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.